All right, we're back here with Mic'd Up MNUSA. Again, my name is Jamie Nelson, Marketing Director with MNUSA, and today we're here with Coach Swenson. Coach Swenson is the head coach at Wayzata. And Coach, you do so many different things. Why don't I let you let us know about all the different hats you're wearing these days?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a dad and a husband. I have 3 kids.
That's a smart way to start out when we're in quarantine, by the way.
Yeah. Well, my wife works in a nursing home in a long-term facility, so she has to go to work every single day and help people there. But yeah, I've got the 3 at home with me. A junior in high school, a 8th grader, and a 7th grade daughter. And so, you know, as a wrestling coach, that they occupy a lot of my time.
Do all 3 wrestle?
No, my daughter doesn't. She's in cross country and gymnastics.
Very cool.
And she was going to be doing track this year. And so besides that, I'm a high school teacher. The last 3 years, I've been a dean of students at Wayzata High School, and then head wrestling coach. As head wrestling coach, or in addition to, I'm the Section 5 AAA section rep, and then I was just elected this year to be the for the Coaches Association, the president-elect. So it's a 3-year deal, and
is that counting your elect year? Or?
It's right. It's next year as the incoming, then it's the president, and then it's outgoing, and that's about as much information as I know.
All right, and we're gonna dive into some of your president-elect initiatives and what motivated you to take on that additional responsibility, because you clearly have enough going already, right?
Well, yeah, and I also am a youth coach at Wayzata, so I do Wednesday night practices with the youth club in the wintertime, and try to get to as many tournaments. I used to be able to get to more when my kids were in the youth club, but I still try to get to some and try to support the youth club as much as I can.
Does Wayzata have a Greco freestyle club for the off season as well?
Yes, we do. We have great people who are involved. Over the last few years, Darren Homey has done the Greco portion of it. As far as I know,
not a bad guy to have doing your Greco.
Yeah, great guy, very supportive guy, and he, as far as I know, he was the only one running a strictly Greco practice besides for the Storm, and so it was last year. It was on Monday nights, and we had kids from all over the place showing up to do just Greco, and then David Silverberg, for the last 6 years, has been our preseason and our freestyle coach. So we've had some good things going at Wayzata.
And the only reason I bring that up is I'm picking up on a trend with the up and coming teams, or the teams that are already established. When I say established, just always in the hunt for that state qualifier level, right? In Minnesota, being at the top every year is pretty tough, right? But there's that consistent 20 teams. There's some themes that it seems like they all have in common, right? And that off-season Greco freestyle program seems to be a big part of it.
Yeah. There's some different states do different things. And I think in Minnesota, where head coaches and coaches for high school programs are very limited in the amount of contact that they can have with the athletes in the off season, you really have to rely on an army of people to create a successful program. So whether we were talking about St. Michael or Simley or Casson or any of the top programs, they have a lot of good people who support wrestling. It's not just a sport, it's a lifestyle. And a lot of people who live with, and that's their lifestyle choice, is wrestling. And I think at Wayzata we have a great group of people who live that lifestyle. One person said to me today, didn't realize how much it affects the family until you can't have wrestling, and it's affecting his whole the whole being, the mom, the kids, everything. So we're fortunate at Wayzata that we have a lot of great people involved.
I just got off the phone not too long ago with a mutual friend of ours, and he's on his 5th mile. He said right now he hasn't walked in years, but he's so stressed out of his gourd right now. He's on his 5th mile. Just, what do we do? And he's got a son like you that's a junior and ended up having a great season this year. And just, what are all the different opportunities? And it's such a weird time, right? We could dive into that as well later in the conversation. So one of the things that I'm curious about, right, is I was on one of these interviews with another coach in the Minnesota market, and he brought up Wayzata as one of his favorite up and coming teams, and how consistent it's been over the last couple of years, and we could see it get better and better. And for a lot of those who know me on the forum, I'm Get Your Points. I don't try to hide behind a screen name like some people do. I know you don't hide behind your screen name either, which I appreciate. With that said, I posted, who had the returning state qualifiers, and when I did the math and the wins, it just data only, right? I have you number 2 coming in. So why don't you talk to us about how you've brought in a program, and what I'll consider, when you look at a lot of your wrestling schools, they come from what I'll call more blue collar communities, right? And if most of us who are going to be watching this are probably from Minnesota, and I don't know how many of us would consider Wayzata a beautiful town, right? Love the town, right?
Blue. Very blue.
Yeah, that might be the only blue thing about Wayzata is your team colors. So not that there's not some hardworking blue collar people in Wayzata, I'm sure there are, but it's not traditionally considered a blue collar community. So tell us how did you get where you guys are at right now? Sure, overnight deal, right?
Yeah, right. No, I will say that I'll go back to mentioning all the people. So my family, we moved up from Florida 8 years ago. We were renting. The kids were little. Logan, I think, might have been in 2nd grade or something like, or 1st grade. Kale was in 4th. I was coaching at Washington Tech Magnet School in St. Paul.
Wrestling powerhouse.
They used to be the Arlington High. It used to be Arlington High School, and then things had changed. They had a middle school.
When did that change? Do you know?
I don't have the date off the top of my head. I don't want to give you the wrong date.
I might be old enough to remember it. That's the scary thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, people know Arlington. People knew Arlington. So then when we moved up here, they reached out to me and said, we've had a junior high program. We want a high school program. We want you to start a high school program. We have a mat, we have some gym space, and we have an assistant coach for you. Hey, let's do this. Right. So worked there for 2 years.
Can we stop there for a quick second? Cause I think everyone's going to wonder, I mean, obviously Florida to Minnesota is a natural draw.
Of course.
Of course. It
was too hot. It was too hot in Florida. My wife is from South Dakota, and so we lived there. My wife went to school, and I went to grad school at the University of South Dakota in Vermillion.
Okay, gotcha.
So we lived there, and then Kale was just 1 year old, and we just said, should we go on an adventure? And really, we were taking a dart and throwing it at a map, and it landed on Florida, and we just said, let's do this. And we were down there for 8 years, and it was time to come back closer to my wife's family in South Dakota. So that's what brought us back here.
Yep.
And so then so what I say, so
you're at the magnet school for 2 years.
6 years ago. Yeah. So 6 years ago, Dave Drogmiller reaches out to me, and we start talking, and he was going to try to, get me a teaching coaching job at at Wayzata because Tim Hartung was at Wayzata, but he was living in Stillwater, and so the commute was killing him. And there were days where he wouldn't go home, and he had a wife and young kids, and he couldn't go home because of the snow or the ice, and he's sleeping at Drogue Miller's house, and it was just war on him. So Tim was looking to try something different, get closer to home, and I was looking to get somewhere where I could build a youth club and work with people, and obviously look for a school district that was really top notch for my kids academically. Wayzata was checking a lot of those boxes, and when I moved here, it was kind of like the stars aligned. There was a lot of people with a lot of young kids who our joke out here is called all in. You're all in. And people, I don't even want to name all of them because if I leave somebody off, I'd feel terrible. But it was pretty much what you see on the high school team right now, and a few middle schoolers, their families. That was the start of it. They were in second grade and third grade at that time through sixth and seventh grade. That was kind of the age group, and some were having babies at that time. They were just young guys and gals who were having, their child was 2 years old. Well, now that 2-year-old is now 10 years old in the club,
Yeah.
So it just kind of worked out and lined up. And
So you telling us your cupboards are pretty deep for a few years too, Coach? Is that what
I like where we're at. Yeah, I like where we're at. And so with when we moved there, I would, some people might think pro or con of this philosophy, but we believed in wrestling as much as you could, getting as many matches as you could as a youth. I'll give credit to an Apple Valley. Well, it was an Apple Valley dad at the time. When we moved up from Florida, he said, "Oh, your son's in fourth grade. How many matches has he wrestled?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, about 20 matches a year or something like that." And he shook his head and said, "Wow, we wrestle 100 matches a year." And I said, 100 matches? No way. And we realized we ended up being up here in Minnesota. We got about 100 matches. So when I moved to Wayzata, it was almost the exact same thing. We had all these dads and all these families looking to do stuff. And they said, well, I said to them, "How many matches you wrestle last year?" And they said, "Oh, 12, 14. I said, "Let's bump that up to 100. And they bought in. And like I said, it's been a big family thing for the last 6 years. The kids hang out together, their friends, the parents, the moms hang out, the dads. We've got some dads who, after they go to a youth tournament, they, it was like certain traditions were made. We'd go to the Pony Stampede in Stillwater for a youth tournament. And then we always went to the Mexican restaurant afterwards and watched whatever playoff football game was on. And it was always like, we go to Stillwater, we go eat Mexican food. And like, we have those different things around. And now we've got some younger dads and coaches who are starting that stuff all up again.
It's fun watching the next guy do it. You get a little envious, and there's envy and relief, I think, at the same time, right?
I'm a big fan of them. I just, as long as they can keep the train rolling, we're going to be in good shape.
Now, also, I know a lot of the high schools these days, I don't want to say they work in conjunction, but they definitely endorse private USA sanctioned clubs as well, right? And yeah. I believe your squad takes advantage of probably multiple, but I think you have a lot that go to a particular club too, right? Do you have a good relationship with one of the clubs in town?
Yeah, definitely. Minnesota Elite is where most of my guys go. Chad Erickson, Jake Avery, Dakota Trom. They've been great to me and my family personally. Chad to my boys, especially to Kale, has been tremendous.
Yeah. Chad puts out some great wrestlers too. He really does.
He does. We've got a smaller group, than Pinnacle. And we have kids, we have Wayzata wrestlers who go to Pinnacle, and I talk to Paulson and Lawrence about them and making sure that kind of we're on the same page in the wintertime, because the club coaches are working with these kids for 9 months, and then the kids come in, and if I see something or I'm curious about something, obviously it's easy to talk to Chad about it because I see him twice a week. But where Jared at Pinnacle, I don't really see him much, so I'll shoot him a text and say, hey, my guy seems to be doing this. Have you talked to him about it, or have you seen this? Mm-hmm. He'll shoot back, and so we exchange ideas on that. And so it's been a great relationship with everybody in this state. But I would say definitely, I work for Minnesota Elite every once in a while in the preseason. I'll take their 5 through 7 year olds and do the preseason wrestling camp with them. It's been fun because you see the little brothers of the high school kids that are going on right now. Like you've got the little Cardinal boy who is who's from Byron, and now he's up wrestling around up there.
Let's be honest. Those Cardinal boys, they don't have a choice, right?
They're in.
Boys. I bet them jokers are home scrapping as we're doing this right now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Their dads are wrestling freestyle and Greco.
Now, do you think with those guys, is there any utensils involved? Any big spoons? Maybe an occasional hammer?
I would put it on. I would put it on if people are using weapons. I might put it on maybe Amy Peterson, who's had enough. Maybe she's finished it up on them. So
but she's got to make up for the weight difference, right? They got to buy a couple pounds.
They got their hands full down there.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they're producing that family's producing some of the best wrestlers in the state right now.
Oh, absolutely. When
you got the Petersons and the Cardinals.
Right?
Don't know that. So
Matthew, yeah. Right? Matthew and Mitchell and Maxwell and then Derek up in Forest Lake and
Derek just Metro Athlete of the year this year. So congratulations.
I saw that. Yep. Derek's a Minnesota Elite kid, wrestles with Kale all the time. It's
Derek's already committed, right? He's
committed to SDSU.
Yeah, he's going to be a Jackrabbit, right?
Yep.
Love it. Yeah. Right. Well, we gave them some free plugs today, right?
Yeah, there you go. They're doing it right, and like I said, with the special thing about clubs here is in Minnesota compared to like when I was in Florida, we didn't use clubs. Coaches could coach 365, so we didn't need them.
A lot of states can.
Yeah. And so when you get a good relationship with people and these coaches care about the kids, it really is special. With Minnesota Elite, I gave a lot of props to Chad, but Kale was wrestling in Fargo this past summer, and Dakota was there with him because I don't coach on the Fargo staff. So I'm just up in the stands screaming and yelling. And Dakota was there with Kale the whole way. And then Billy Pierce took Kale under his wing as if he was Billy's kid from St. Francis.
To have a guy like Billy Pierce just walking around grabbing kids, we're lucky.
Absolutely. Kale was in the final or in the semifinals, and he won the match in the semis. And Billy turned around and like scanned for where I was in the Fargo Dome, and he's jumping up and down like this. And I was like, man, thank God,
Well, he's a dad, I mean, he gets it. He gets it. And Billy's one of the greats, right? I love Billy.
Absolutely. So we're really lucky that we have all these people who are willing to help and do.
We got the Augsburg coaches up there helping out. I mean, there's a lot of good guys up there helping out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm glad we got a chance to talk about Min Elite a little bit too, because they put out so many good wrestlers, right? And my son, just because of a few of his friends, is a Pinnacle guy, and we have great results at Pinnacle. Love those guys. But Chad's such a great coach too, and I think sometimes because he's a little more subdued, maybe a little bit more quiet. I don't think sometimes his club gets the fair recognition that it deserves. So I'm glad we were able to.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the Minnesota Elite's got so many great things going on, and what I think a lot of people like about it is that with a little bit smaller number. And it's not that much smaller, but Chad and Dakota and Jake find a lot of private session or breakout groups with these kids. And so there's a lot of personal kind of one-on-one training within the practice training. And so it's, you know,
I'll tell you one of my personal agendas with MNUSA wrestling that I would love to see, and I see in some of the other states. Minnesota gets a little bit nationwide because, you know, you and I are coming back to Minnesota, so we know what people outside of Minnesota think about it, right? In Minnesota, whether it's fair or not, from the outside looking in, is considered a metro state. And what I mean by that is you have some states that, like Iowa, where rural wrestling is probably, you know, considered as good as their urban. Wisconsin's more of a rural wrestling. Their smaller towns tend to be their best towns, right? Their Milwaukee schools outside of one or two, their Milwaukee suburb schools aren't as strong. You know, Ohio is probably a good blend of both, right? Pennsylvania is a little bit more rural with a couple inner. Minnesota, I think, gets really kind of considered an urban market. And one of the things I'd really love to see is in some of these hub markets, I'd love to see some more smaller private clubs open, right? And what I'm seeing in Wisconsin is their rural kids are doing well because the coaches and the private clubs have that good relationship. And we had Will Short on last week, and he mentioned some of the same things you did. You got to call those coaches. You work with them, talk to them. What's the technique? Try to feather the two together the best you can. So there's a lot of things that you said that are pretty in common in step with what the other top programs in the state are doing. So whether that's affirmation to what you're doing or whether it's coincidence, you know, either way, it sounds like there's a lot of commonalities.
Yeah, I think, well, 2 points on your point about, you know, more clubs and whatever. I know that, you know, David Thorne and the Thorne camps have kind of headed west. And, you know, besides for home base being in Odin, you also have, I know he has like workouts in Wilmer and places like that. So that's heading further away from Metro. Yep. And then I know every time we have freestyle and Greco, the boys from up north come down. And so last year and the year before that, I think we saw a real, a larger group of kids coming from, you know, Champ brings guys down. Yep. And Jake Clark and whatnot. Yep. So that's really positive.
Yeah, Jake Clark up at St. Cloud is getting things moving. Yep.
Right. And then the other thing, whether, you know, I'm thinking it or everybody's thinking it, I think the major programs are the ones who the coaches are thinking like the wrestlers. And what attracted most of us to this sport is that this is the one sport that you can outwork your opponent. And if you just work really, really hard, you can have quite a bit of success.
Especially at the high school level. You start getting to the collegiate level. Yeah. And then the athleticism, I think, plays a bigger factor.
It does, but you know, even with the college level, you start to have other things that start to get into people's way. You know, that people have been wrestling for a long time. Now they're getting an internship. Their bodies are broken. Yep. So there's a lot of that mental game with the college. But I think if you take a look at, like, you know, Will Short, like you said, you interviewed him last week. You know, he's gonna try to outwork you. He's going to find out what everybody else is doing. And, you know, he's been in the game longer than I have. And it's not really a secret. We're going to outwork everybody else. Why does he take his teams to all those places? Because he's going to get the best competition. Why? Because wrestling the best competition is hard work. And so you're pushing that on the kids, and that's what they do. And so that's kind of how I operate. If I feel like somebody's outworking me, boy, I can't really sleep at night if that's going on. So
I could see that about you. I know you a little bit, but I could see you actually being the kind of guy that would lose some sleep over that. So
yeah, I wake up a little bit, but
and I think there's another ingredient. This is a huge compliment to you. I think there's another ingredient, whether it's a tennis team or a croquet team or a badminton team or a wrestling team. I think, you know, old Jeff Jordan from Ohio, right?
Yep.
And Jeff and I got to be friends a few years back, and we were thinking about moving back to the Twin Cities, and he gave me some advice. My wife wanted to get back and gave me some advice. He goes, wherever you go, you got to find a maniac on a mission.
Yeah.
Right. And I would definitely categorize you as a maniac on a mission. Right. And that's a compliment. That's not
it's a compliment. Sometimes it gets me in trouble. Like, I've talked to you before about that. Sometimes my mouth or my
energy,
actions and energy might rub people the wrong way. But
and I can relate. I'm that guy at times too, right? So
passionate, it's just passionate, and it's competitive. It is about the kids, but man, as coaches, we're competing too. We want to win the duel. We want to win the tournament. And so there's a lot of that as well. And so like we call it the crazy dads here as well. Yep. We've got all kinds of nicknames over here in Wayzata, but that we're just fortunate right now. We got a lot of crazy dads and a lot of crazy moms, and we're just crazy for wrestling, and it's a positive. It's not a negative. So
I had a coach tell me a couple of years ago, I go, hey, your program seems to be dipping a little bit right now compared to where it's normally at. He goes, yeah, I don't have any crazy dads right now. Right. You can't win titles without a handful of crazy dads on your team, right? And he goes, they're a pain in the tail. Don't get me wrong. He goes, you don't want them when they're there, and then the second they're not there, you realize you got to have some crazy dads to pull it off.
Absolutely. I could go down the list of the best schools in the state right now, and I could probably, if we looked at it, I could tell you this kid's dad, that guy, online somebody had posted something about New Prague and Wayzata. Yeah, put all of us together. You got a whole bunch of crazy people, because that's why people are talking about it, because the family, absolutely. It's an all-in thing.
Absolutely. So before we go to break, the other question, and I want to make sure I give this question enough time, so maybe we'll even dive into it after break, right? But so you decided to, or somebody decided to elect you, or you decided to throw your name in the hat, but you're the president-elect for the Minnesota Coaches Association, right? And that's something you don't have to do, and normally it's something that you feel obligated to do. But what drew you to stepping up to fill that role? That's not always an easy job.
No, and by no means do I want to get political or anything like that.
You didn't run as a party, did you? You didn't run as conservative or liberal.
Right. Right. But I do have a platform. No, if you want, there's a lot of people who are always wanting to make changes. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people who think things should be the way they are. I have heard, because I'm not from here and I haven't been here, for decades, that, they want certain things done. Well, everyone thinks that it's very easy to just get things done, or why don't we just do that? Well, I got to see how it works. I got to see how it operates. So this is when you're a section rep, you get a little taste of that. You get to figure it out a little bit. When you're a head coach and you go to the coaches meetings, you figure it out a little bit. Well, this would be kind of the next step up of, for example, we're at the state tournament in the Excel Center, and there's many, many things people want done differently at the state tournament.
Well, let's wrap up on that. I've got some of my own strong success.
Yeah. So just one example is, why don't we warm up on the mats before the kids wrestle? And so it's not a new idea. This has been brought up before, but you just think like, this has got to be simple. Like, why can't they just warm up for a half an hour or 15 minutes? And all these coaches before me have done this job, and so I don't know why you can't. So I need to go do this role, learn the position, learn what's going on, so I can be a better advocate for change or for not change. And so that's just one of the things. And of course, after the break, if you want, we could talk about my main thing, that really pushed me is the 106-pound weight class.
And I think you opened up Pandora's box for a couple more questions for me. So when we wrap up maybe segment 3, we'll dive into some of the things that I've heard out there for the state tournament that we now know who to push to push, right? So,
Sure. Yeah.
all right. So why don't we go to break? We've got a bunch of great sponsors right now. What MNUSA is doing right now is working with all of our local business owners and supporters that support MNUSA and support wrestling in the state right now. And we want to make sure we're giving a shout out in these tough times. You know, guys, support local business, support, if you're a wrestling family, support the families within wrestling. So when we go to break, I'm hoping the technology piece catches up to us here and we can acknowledge some of those companies. So when we come back, Coach, let's dive into what motivated you, okay?
Sure.
All right, Coach, we're back at it. This is the most intriguing part for me, and you and I had a little pre-discussion before the interview, before you were kind enough to give us some good content to keep our wrestling minds motivated out there, right? So going into that, and you and I are pretty like-minded on this, and I'm going to bring on somebody else who sees it from a different aspect, because I think the state's not 100% one way or the other on this. I'd say it's pretty divided. But one of your motivational pieces is making sure we're protecting some of these weight classes. There's national rumors going on about weight classes being cut, changed, moved. So why don't I open it up to you from there and give us some of your concerns or what motivated you to take on a bigger step?
Yeah. So, you know, full disclosure, I wrestled 103 as a junior in high school. Kale has wrestled 106. He wrestled 138 this year as a junior, but he wrestled 106 as a freshman. My son coming up, Logan, he'll be a 6-pounder next year, hopefully. And so I do have some personal to it, but before they were even wrestling, years ago, we were in Florida and we were having dinner with Mike Moyer, and they were talking about getting rid of 103. Mm-hmm. And we were all at dinner, and I begged him. I begged him. I said, please don't do this. Please don't do this. 103, there are kids. There is a lot of little kids, lightweights. And in Florida, they don't have middle schoolers wrestling in there. But I had a 4.
They have 8th grade now, don't they?
It depends on what school you go to, if it's under the building or if it's a private school. But if your public school doesn't have it, you don't have it. But I had a 3-time state champ down there, sophomore, junior, senior at 103. And so, and I connected with him just 2 years ago, and he's still a smaller grown man, you know? And so we begged, and 103 left and became 106. And so now we have 106, and I don't like it as much as 103, but we have it, and there it is. So did
you know the genesis of why they left 106? I happen to know the genesis of it.
You can tell me what you think, and I can tell you what I think.
Well, the genesis of it. So what I looked up, this is 2 years ago, and I looked it up on the National Federation of High School Sports, and by the way, I'm in favor of all weights, and I have no problem going to 15 weights. I'm a believer in being inclusive, not exclusive. So I'm all for, if you want to push 103 agenda, I'll back you up on that. But what they came up with was, the article I read from the National High School Federation of Sports was the average. So and I challenged you to look up some data too, and you looked it up. And if you saw it, I don't even know, Coach. I didn't add them all up, but I'm guessing there's a couple hundred sports that they're accountable for, right? Between, I saw surfing and water skiing. And I mean, other states have sports that we're not necessarily thinking about, where they might think we're crazy because we have hockey.
Correct.
Right? So, or curling, right? So I know Wisconsin has organized ice fishing now as a sport. So the National Federation of High School Sports has to embody all these sports, right? So they're not going to make special exception for one sport. Everything's going to be kind of generalized, right? And the article I read was that the average varsity athlete becomes a varsity athlete for the first time at age 16. And if we look at most sports, makes sense, right? So when they looked at the weight, because I was curious, where did they come up with these weights? Like, where did these weights come from? I mean, are these just arbitrary weights? Were they on a curve? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure any of that out. But they took it at the average weight of the average 16-year-old.
Right.
Right. And so you now have a 17-year-old, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we look at the curve, they're saying the average varsity person is 16 years of age. And then the weight curve goes from there. And that's where they came up to 106. Now, they kept 106 because they were trying to promote females coming into wrestling. Right. And at the time, there wasn't the big movement like there has been over the last few years to get girls in their own league. So 106 was the average weight of the average 16-year-old female. And that's how they have kept it. Now, I think you and I know the average curve for the average wrestler is probably lighter than the average basketball player, hockey player, football player, right?
Correct. And by doing that, you're putting the curve on a weight, and I know weight is what we're talking about, but you're taking it in all, well, not you, the federation was putting the discussion on the average high school kid and what they weigh, thus dictating the rules of our sport. That would be like saying we should adjust the rules of basketball because the average height of a kid in high school is this. And then so basketball has to do these certain things now, or tennis players. So although you're right, and that's what Moyer had broken down years ago, and that's why he wanted more of the 195, 220 heavyweights. We have more kids there. We're going to get more athletes out. We're going to get more football players who are going to wrestle now because there's a 220 and they don't have to worry about, the coaches don't have to feel like they're going to make a kid lose weight. These were all what was on the table. And
in many cases and in many states that has proven to be true.
And maybe it has, and maybe it has. And you know, and I don't have I know where the data is, but I don't have the data on every state of what they're doing. And if you know, in 2008 or 10, these things have jumped, and now we've got way more 220s. We have more 220s than we did before because there was no 220 before. Mm-hmm. So of course the numbers are up.
Or they might have been heavyweight.
They might have been heavyweight. And we have a lot less, 100 pounders because they don't have the option. So you're just fattening them up so they can get up to 106. So
and there are some arguments. I mean, just a little push and pull here too. There are some arguments that the average 106 pounder, when they do their skin fold test,
sure,
the average 106 pounder weighed in at their skin fold test that was either 116 or 117 nationwide, right? So they also have the pinch test, and this was intriguing to me as well. The average pinch test, this is 2 years ago when I looked it up, the average pinch test for a high school wrestler was 17% body fat. The average 106 pounder was 14% body fat, right? So, and I believe, what is it? They can, before parent consent, it's 7%?
7%.
Right. So, I mean, all weights shift down a little bit, right?
Sure. And so they're looking at those numbers at what people can be at 7% or whatnot. But, we're not average people. We don't do what the averages tell us to do because, if the average is the norm, well, then the norm would be that we wouldn't wrestle. So the norm high school kid doesn't do what we do, what our kids do, what our athletes do. And so, and maybe that hurts our sport a little bit. Why don't we have teams of 60 kids per school or something like that? Well, there's a lot of things that go with it. What my main deal is, we realize it's hard work. We realize there's lots of other options for kids. We know specialization in high school sports has become very big. Clubs have really taken off. I don't know.
In every sport. In
every single sport. I have had kids over the last few years tell me I would wrestle, but our baseball club is going to Vegas in December, and January we go to Florida, and we have to go to the batting cages 2 nights a week. I know there's 7-on-7 football leagues that are blowing up everywhere now. There's a lot of choices, and the kids are really pushed into specializing.
And in fairness, wrestling does have some of that same effect on other sports too. You've got kids wrestling late in the summer now at Fargo, and so I mean, it's equal, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I wasn't inferring you were blaming other sports. I mean, every sport plays a role in specialization.
Correct. So I realize all those things are going on, and we're not going to be able to really. I don't think our sport's going to make those things change. What I don't want to do is within our own sport do things or pass rules or policies that make it even harder. If the coaches are begging kids to come out, if we're trying to convince them that practicing 5 days a week and then getting a bus at 6 a.m. on a Saturday and then going and coming home at 5 p.m. on a Saturday, and maybe you only wrestled 2 matches, but you're going to sit in this gym in some town the whole time. We have all these things against us. You got to make weight. You can't have lunch one day, all these different things. I don't want to do other things that mess with it. And I cannot see addition through subtraction. I don't see if you get rid of 2 weight classes, more kids are going to go, you know what? I'm much more likely to go out for wrestling now. Oh, I will have my child go out for wrestling, and that 6 a.m. bus doesn't sound so bad.
Right.
Because there's 12 weights. I don't see it. And when I've talked to people, and now maybe it's just who I'm talking to, but very, very few have said to me that they would get rid of 106. I've had 2 discussions with coaches, and it got heated, but at least they were standing up for what they thought. And they said, this is what we believe. I said, this is what I believe. And it is where it is. But the mass majority of everyone I called, talked to, anything, nobody will admit that they want to get rid of 106. There wasn't a vote by the coaches, by the sections and head coaches, because not enough people voted and put in for it. So they don't want to get rid of 106. And those who do, they're being very quiet in meetings. They're being loud on the guillotine. And maybe those are kids, maybe those are parents, maybe I don't know who they are.
I feel like there's a national pressure, right? And I'd looked it up. Statistically, nationwide, 106 is a heavily forfeited weight nationwide. But I don't care. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care. There's 106 pounders out there that work their tail off. Yeah. I said to you the other day, I said, tell me at state, I said, what 2 weight classes don't deserve to be here? Go up and tell those 2 groups of kids right now. Go tell the 170 pounders and the 138 pounders, guys, I know you worked hard, but you don't deserve to be here. What 2 groups don't deserve to be there? So you and I went through a little exercise, and I'm just going to let people know the exercise we went through. 106, and I agree with you 100%. 106 is a transition weight, right? Or what did we deem it as? Is a and this my biggest pet peeve is when people say, let's go to college weights, right? And I'll tell you where I personally have a problem with that is high school is fundamental, right? It's developmental. Did I say fundamental? Developmental, right? So you and I went through and we randomly pulled, what did we pull? About 10, 12 guys from state the other day. Mm-hmm. And we went through and it was 10, 12 really good guys, by the way, right? Yeah. I mean, guys that we could easily look at and say they've been to state, every year for 4 years in a row, basically.
We took the book from the state tournament, the book that they hand out at the state tournament to all the kids who make it to state.
So we didn't dive deep into research, right? Let's not pat ourselves on the back there, right? We went through a book, but what we did do is you and I both went through and looked at multiple kids, and none of them from their 8th and 9th grade year finished their junior, senior year at that weight. Every last kid we looked up, except for Dominic Vicura, who must have came out of the womb huge.
He was big. He's always been big.
Yeah. I think he's a UND commit too, correct?
I believe so. I think he committed the other day.
Dakota, right? But he came out of the womb big.
Yeah.
So I think he wrestled his freshman year at 195 and is now wrestling at 220. Yeah, and my assumption is he's going to be a heavyweight in college. That's my assumption. Maybe he's, I'm guessing, right? But when I look at it, I would deem every single weight class in high school wrestling as developmental, because everybody, whether they started at well, you and I saw it, most of the 170 pounders, minus, my kid and a couple other kids, started at 138, now they're 170. Or they started at 106 and 113, and now they're 38 and 45 pounders. Or they started at 45 and now they're 84 pounders, right? Or it's like Bennett Tabor started at 126 and now he's a 220 pounder, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand what the rush is to get rid of any weight class. They're all developmental.
Yeah. And I think, from my discussion with whoever I've talked to, I think the bottom line is saving dual matches, that the duels are what's important. And to some people, it is the most important thing in our sport. Mm-hmm. So if the dual match is what makes us wrestlers, what makes the dual match better? And the fear of, well, we're forfeiting this weight class, we're forfeiting this, the kid runs out there. So I get it. I just don't know. I don't know if all of us agree that the duel is the most important thing. In your last interview, Will said that you had hit Simley and Montini and Apple Valley all wrestling each other, and Gable and Kirklevy got forfeits. Now they had a heavyweight, but they went
undefeated the entire dual tournament and forfeited those 2 times.
And they so they want to know no part of it. There are many, many times that teams have a 106 pounder.
Absolutely.
He's a brand new kid out of the hallway, and you're going to throw him out there against
yeah.
Correct. Sure. Right. When Paxton was a 106 pounder, you've got this super athletic, energetic guy, and you're going to take first year, maybe been wrestling 1 month, mm-hmm. freshman, and put him out there. And what do teams do? No, forfeit. And it makes that duel look like, well, they didn't have a 106 pounder. They had a 106 pounder. It just wasn't as good as that kid. And so those numbers, some of those things are not put into the stats. When people say, when the email comes out and says, hey, we need you to fill out this survey, have you ever forfeited a weight class? Well, right. Yes, of course I forfeited. Like we were at the Clash this year, and my son got 2 forfeits. He got 2 wins by forfeit at 138.
So it's funny you mentioned that. A good friend of mine years ago did some research when all this cutting down to 12 weight classes came about. And this was, I'm making up a year, but we'll call it 2016. The most forfeited weight class nationwide, according to the National Federation of High School Sports, nationwide was 138.
Really?
Yeah. But why? Probably because some schools got hammers and some don't.
Right. And we're just not going to put that guy out there. I mean, sometimes there have been times where head coaches talk before a match, and I've been on both ends of this, where I've either had the stud or I've had the newer wrestler and said, look, I'll send him out there. I'll give your kid the match, but you got to let your guy know, guy's been wrestling for a month. Mm-hmm. And coaches and kids alike handle that very well. When you're having these duels and you're saying, well, we want to make the duel better, we want to make it more exciting, I believe there are other things to do to make it more exciting. And I think that's the showmanship piece of it. That's the bright lights, the loud music, the walkout music, the giving away free popcorn and a hot dog from the concession stand, in the middle of the match, the band plays, after 7 matches, you have the band play, or the dance team does a deal. There are other things to do. A couple years ago, the head coach at Maple Grove, we're in the section meeting, and we're talking about this because this is when they were going to say, we're going to go down to 12 weights for dual meets only. So this was 2 years ago. And we're going to have no 6 and no 95 unless the two teams say we're going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so the Maple Grove coach goes, oh, he raises his hand. He goes, all right, and funny that this goes right to what you just said. He goes, I haven't had a 138 all year. So just randomly selecting those two weights to not have didn't change anything with his team. And
Correct.
Now the duel is 11 matches. And let's just say, okay, now you're wrestling us. And I didn't have a 170 all year. I was bumping up a 60 and moving back and forth. So now I don't have a 70. He doesn't have a 38. And there's no 106 and no 220. Why have the duel?
Well, and I'll tell you, there's two things I want to dive into. One is I applaud the effort of those folks who are trying to think outside of the box 2 years ago when they said, let's not eliminate, but let's give the coaches an option of 106 and 195. And as two dads, we both have kids at those two weight classes, mine most likely being a 195 pounder, and you have some hammers at that 106 range. So I took it a little personal just because it affects me as a parent, right?
Yeah.
But I appreciate they were trying to think outside the box, right? And I looked at that and I thought, man, this is so subject to be abused by good coaches, right? Because good coaches are going to look for strategies to win. That's part of coaching, right? And there only was a handful of times that people actually opted to take out the 106 and 195. Mm-hmm. And if memory serves me correct, 2 of the 5 times were against Owatonna. And at the time, they had a 106 pounder by the name of Blake West, who most people consider pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. And they had another kid at 195 by the name of Cade King. Yeah. Well, why the heck wouldn't I take those 2 out if that's my choice? I got 2 guys that are going to make state finals at 106 and 195. Those were the only 2 times I know. And so the whole concept was it was supposed to be not abused and not used for strategic gain. Well, how do we say taking Cade King and Blake West out isn't for strategic gain?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And when you're wrestling duels, there's a score that is being kept. And at the end of the duel, somebody won, somebody lost. It's for conference. And so you're going to do as any sport coach would do. You're trying to win the duel ethically. You're trying to win the duel. So if that is in the rule, it's in the rule to forfeit a weight class. It's in the rule to bump a guy up. It's why we do the coin flip at the beginning of the match. Yep. So, if really we wanted to look at that, and we thought that was being abused, and it wasn't abused, and that's why it's actually not in effect for next year.
Right.
But there were some people who had some major concerns about it, and that's just the metro area. Now you go outstate and you get some of these smaller towns. They used it, they liked it, they didn't like it. If I'm from small town Minnesota, and I have a 106 pounder, I've got a family who lives in my town who are a little bit smaller kids. Boy, that could be devastating to your program. That could be devastating. You could have a family who knows that they live in a small town and that they've got their 3 sons are all going to be 6 pounders at some point, mm-hmm. Or maybe they're enormous. Maybe you've got a town and they're all big people and they're 220 pounders, but they're a good lean 220, not quite a heavyweight. And they don't like that either. They want to fight at their fighting weight. What are those families going to do? I'm afraid that they'll either say we're not wrestling, or we're moving, and that's what's going to happen. And so, I mean, you watch enough USA wrestling and NYWA state with the dual state tournament. Mm-hmm. All these towns, MNUSA seems to have everybody from every part of the state. The times that we were down at NYWA, we saw a lot of small towns that we don't normally see. And teams that will one day be 1As. Boy, they loved those weight classes. They loved I can't even remember how many dual weight classes. There were 17 dual weights for the little kids. Mm-hmm. They all loved all of them. So why are we promoting that? And then as you get older, get rid of it doesn't seem like it helps our sport.
To steer this back, there's a couple topics that we kind of want to dive into a little bit. Yeah. One, this is a rumor. So I want to go with a fact and then a rumor. The fact is, since 2002, when they introduced the 14 weight classes, the National Federation of High School Sports is up tens of thousands of wrestlers since they introduced that weight class, right? They are considering the 14 weight classes nationwide a success. Last year, another fact is last year, boys wrestling was the third fastest growing male sport, not female male. If you add the two together, it's exploding, right? But the third fastest, we were net 1,800 and change in positive wrestlers, and we were net, I want to say it was 62 new wrestling programs, right? And some of those could be coming out of co-op and not co-op, which kind of segues into our next conversation. And for a lot of the towns that are looking at the 12 to 14, I think they're looking at the 12 as a way to save their town from having to go to co-op. That's what I hear a lot,
yep.
Right?
Yep.
So, and then I'm going to give you a couple details, and then I want to get your opinion. So I challenged you, because I know you're a data guy like me. I challenged you to look up the National Federation High School.org for those other folks who want to look at data versus opinion. And we found a lot of stats, right? We found that Minnesota over a 40-year window has been pretty consistent with his numbers, right? Give or take 500-600 a year, some years up, some years down, but over a 40-year window, we've averaged between 81 and 8,600 wrestlers, give or take. And then there's a couple anomaly years where it was a spike and a decline, right?
Correct.
But the model that I've heard for wrestling with smaller numbers is they're modeling 8 and 9 man football. Have you not heard that as well, Coach?
Correct.
And so the smaller towns are saying, hey, we're putting off this competitive program with this 8, 9 man football. So on the National Federation of High School Sports.org site, I wasn't able to find a lot of data on Minnesota. And I compared Minnesota and Wisconsin to each other for a lot of reasons. They're about the same population. Historically, they've had about the same exact amount of wrestling teams. Culturally, we're pretty similar. We like to ice fish. We like to bowl. A few adult beverages here and there. The two states have a lot in common, right? With that said, and we also wrestle each other a lot, during the school year. So there was a lot of parallels we could draw. Their 8, 9 man football program really got started a few years before the Minnesota 8, 9 man football did. And what I learned, if you go to the nationalfederation.org site, that out of all their 8, 9 man football teams, about 30% of them are now co-oping, right? So my fear for wrestling is if that's the model we're using to stop co-oping, it worked for a couple of years, and then those same small towns had to co-op anyway.
Correct.
Right. So
because it may not even be about sports at that point. They're co-oping their whole school because the school can't even keep the electricity on if you keep all the kids in one building. Right.
So the next intriguing thing, and I think you were a little flabbergasted at this as well, this is the one that shocked everybody. And there's a local, I don't know if I want to call him a celebrity yet, but a good friend of mine who hosts a pretty popular Minnesota-based wrestling podcast. He kind of challenged me to look at some numbers. So I took him to the site, and we did a ton of research together, and we randomly pulled 25 schools from Minnesota. And they weren't winning schools, they weren't losing schools. We just randomly picked 25. And the reason we went with 25 is that's about 10% of the school. And so we figured if we pulled a 10% poll, we'd have a general idea. The 25 schools we pulled, they average 32 to 33 wrestlers per team. And that's co-ops, that's Wayzata. You obviously skewed the number pretty high. But it was 32 wrestlers per team. And I think the smallest team we found was about 17. Now, Wisconsin has not had the same amount of co-ops that Minnesota has. So Minnesota has, I have the number here. It has 343 schools that participate in wrestling according to the National Federation of Sports, right? And Wisconsin has 355 high schools that participate. But according to Track Wrestling, who just tracks the wins and losses for both Minnesota and Wisconsin, Wisconsin still has over 300 teams where Minnesota's down around 240 to 250. Is that not the data you kind of saw as well?
Yeah, that's very close. Yep. Yeah.
So Wisconsin's held true to less co-oping. Okay.
Yeah.
Wisconsin has quadruple the amount of forfeits that Minnesota has. And here's the alarming thing. So even though Wisconsin is not co-oping like Minnesota is, they're down to 7,300 wrestlers where we're still at 8,600 wrestlers. So we're 1,100 wrestlers ahead, even though we have almost 100 less teams. So then the debate would become, is it better to have more teams or more kids participating? So I'm going to ask you as a teacher, would you rather see more teams or more kids participating? That's a loaded question.
Sure. And I mean, my situation in the suburb is different than somebody
Colossally different, right?
You know, somebody who's living up near Canada or the Washington Tech wrestling team. You know, there's all kinds of different things. Of course, I want both, right? I want the schools to have the sport, and if they have 10 kids out, they have 10 kids out. But it's their team, and then maybe they don't do duels, and maybe they go to some individual tournaments.
That's the beautiful thing where Wisconsin or where many states have like those 7-7, or Illinois used to have that 4-4-4 rule where you got to do 4
we
duels.
can do whatever we want.
That's right. We have 16 weigh-ins. Do whatever the heck you want that fits for your community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look back, this was before I was there, but this guy's famous in Florida. He was down by Fort Myer. And so this old coach had maybe like a team of about 8 kids on the team. So they didn't do any duels. You throw them in the van, they show up at a tournament, and 6 would be in the finals. The other 2 would take third, and they'd go home winning the tournament. You know, and they felt pretty good about it. And kids like Scotty Sentes, who's now the Campbell head coach, is now he was part of that youth club and in that general area. So it can be done. And but of course, I think if we're trying to save our sport, if we're trying to make it look like it's something that shouldn't be cut, that should be around, that's something that would then feed colleges, and colleges wouldn't make that the first cut program of athletic budget cuts. I think we have to have large numbers. It's very important to be on that list. And when you and I looked at that list, I kind of looked at where was wrestling on the top 10 sports since 1970. And we've been at number 8, number 9 for high school, but then 5
track across country. Yeah.
Yes, for participation numbers, and then we're up at 5, and so when you look at these numbers, where in 1970 or 1980, we're really close in Minnesota at 1980 numbers for participation, with all these things going on, including the growth of hockey, which, I looked at hockey and I looked at basketball numbers, and I looked at what was going on with them. And as hockey continued to grow and specialize, obviously it's going to take winter athletes away. And yet we've stayed where we've needed to stay. So where we're thinking that there's all these problems in the sport, and we must make dramatic changes to save wrestling. Nobody's cutting it. We're not saying high school, the Minnesota High School League isn't saying wrestling's in trouble. We're not in trouble. There are some towns.
It's different. Not everything's better. Not everything's worse.
No, absolutely. And there are some towns who are going through things, but those things are not just wrestling things. Those are robotic sports. And now with the economy the way it is, who knows what the next 2 years are going to look like? So
here's one of my concerns, right?
Yeah.
If we go away from the numbers, right? These aren't just wrestlers. These are future fans, donators, referees, coaches, right? I was having this conversation with Will Short off the air last week, and I said, what's it going to look like with the growth of girls' sports? Because now you're going to have just as many crazy moms who want to be in the corner as crazy dads, right? And the beautiful thing about basketball and soccer is the moms know the sport. And we've got this wave coming up that's maybe 10 years from now. this wave of future moms who not only know the sport, but they did the sport.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. Correct. The
And
moms that actually wrestled. Yep.
right. So now to me doesn't seem, the short game doesn't seem to make sense for the long game, because the long game is we have this new wave of moms coming in that are about 10 years away from getting their kids involved in wrestling.
Yep.
They're going to know and appreciate and love the sport, and they're going to be referees. They might be the boys coach, right? I mean, there's a whole new wave of wrestling fanatics coming.
Sure.
And I'd hate to see us stifle that when it's still 10 years away from now.
Absolutely. And you know, when these girls who are wrestling right now are adults and they have families, they might push wrestling onto their sons and daughters because they did it.
They did it. And I think their husband might be afraid to say no. If they wrestle.
So, you know, and so I just think that, you know, once again, to kind of wrap that up, I'm just so, I want to make sure there is a voice for all the talent in Minnesota. And I don't care if you're a 7th grader, an 8th grader, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. There is a lot of talented kids who weigh between 95 pounds and 110 pounds, 113 pounds, 120 pounds down to 95 pounds. There's a lot of talented kids. And when I talked to Chad Erickson at Minnesota Elite, or I talked to Jared Lawrence at Pinnacle and a year ago and talked to them about this, they absolutely we've got too much talent to hide that talent, to showcase that talent.
I talked to Thorne and he feels the same way, right?
Thorne, same thing. Thorne, if you go to a Thorne camp when it's that age group and that weight group, my gosh, it is pure wrestling. It's excitement. You could charge admission to let people watch it.
And then at the same token, the state of Minnesota is rich with big guys: Gable, Tony Nelson, Kirkfleet, right?
Sure.
King and Cade King and Glazier, and you know we've had just this great group of athletic big guys come through, and I'll tell you, just on a personal preference, to me the most two exciting weight classes in college right now are 133 and heavyweight. And I think the reason that heavyweight is so good at college right now is you've got these 220 pounders in high school that are athletic, that are evolving into heavyweight. You even hear the commentators say, now this guy's more of a traditional old school heavyweight, not what the new heavyweights look like. Right. The new
heavyweights wrestle like they're 170 pounders.
And they're built like 170 pounders, right?
Yeah.
So with that, the rumor part of it, and then we'll wrap up, you know, we've been a little long on this. The rumor part of it is that the National Federation of High School Sports is super is a bad word to use, but they are excited about the results that they've seen with the growth of wrestling in Texas and Georgia and other states by having the bigger weights and bringing in the athletes. So what the rumor is that they are steadfast on 14 weights. What it sounds like is they are going to leave each state to be able to continue to vote with 14 weights, but let each state determine what those weights might look like for those states. Because I know, like in Hawaii, 285 is not heavy enough. They want a 340-pound weight class, right? And in other states, they want a 99-pound weight class. Right. I mean, different parts of our our country, we look different. We're different sizes.
Yeah.
So I kind of like, if the rumor's true, I kind of like where they're headed to say, let each state figure out what the right 14 weight classes might be for that state.
Yeah, and they would put whatever is the national recommendation. So let's say they did that, they would leave it as it is. Here's the national weights, and then states would vote to change. And in the section rep meeting before the state tournament, we had said, whatever the federation does is what we will do. We won't be like Michigan, who will say, okay, we're going to go 6, 12, 19, 25. We will go with whatever that list is. So if the list says 106, 113, 20, that at this time, that's where that's where we're going to lie. And the discussion can continue, and you can go out, you can find somebody who would disagree with me, but I think you're going to find more people who agree with keeping 106, like I do. And
I do too. I want to keep 106 as well.
Yeah.
I do.
And since I talk about 106, I don't want to be hypocritical and say, okay, well, as long as we've got 106, I don't care about 220 because the Swensons are small people. Nope. I think you got to keep both. You got to keep the weight classes. I don't mind I wouldn't mind 14 weight classes. And if we looked at them and said, based on Minnesota numbers, are we looking good here? Are we, is 138, 45, 52, is that the right spread? I don't mind breaking down those numbers and looking at that stuff, but I do know when we go to big tournaments, we go to the Christmas tournament, we go to Rumble on the Red, we try to hit, good dual tournaments in our state. We do any of those things, those weight classes are loaded. And like you said earlier, you go to the high school state tournament. This is the top of the line. You've separated out. You've moved the cream of the crop to a certain weekend. You don't find a weight class that you would just go, you 16 are terrible. You shouldn't have been here. There's no way. And so if we're thinking about like, well, what's good for the sport and what stands out, we're already doing it with the state tournament. That's what stands out. So then during the year is developing kids. We've even gone so far as to say, when you're at a tournament, you can bring 3 extra guys in. And for the last few years, I've brought in extra guy at 106. Yes. And we were at one tournament, and the 2 largest brackets were 106 and 220. We were at I think it was like the Mountain West Tonka tournament. Mm-hmm. It was right at the end of the year, so kids have quit, hurt, match count issues, and we were sitting there and we bracketed the whole tournament. And I sat back and I said, wait a minute, everyone, I just want to make sure I see something correctly. Are the 2 biggest brackets this Friday night 106 and 220? And everyone started laughing because, okay, I just wanted to make sure I just saw what the 2 biggest brackets were. Yep. So there's a lot of arguments. And of course, I love the sport, and it's not going to make me quit the sport or anything like that if things changed. But your original question is, why did I get involved in any of this stuff? This is why, because you and I could talk for 45 minutes to 3 hours on this topic.
We could, and it's part of my motivation as well, no doubt about it. So I want to wrap up. We had some other questions, but I think there's a lot of topics that we both wanted to address on the 12 to 14, and I think you did a great job of helping us understand where you were coming from, and hopefully I provided a little bit of data. So what was there? You had mentioned the state tournament, maybe some other motivating factors for why you wanted to take on more responsibilities.
Well, I like the idea of change in some aspects if it's good for our athletes and makes things more fun. I 100% agree with every single person who says, why aren't we doing double elimination full bracket? But I also do understand that we use the Excel Center and there's only so much space. And so then there's the time issue.
We pay by the session. Is that correct? We pay.
Yeah. You'd have
right. A whole nother session.
We'd add a whole nother session, but there are ways to do it.
Yes.
There are ways to do it. There are things that really people who are smarter than me who have formulated and come up with all the times and everything say that this can get done.
I think Al Ben said it'd take an extra hour and 42 minutes.
Talking about an extra hour and 42 minutes. There is a push for women's wrestling. And if you did it at the same time, the brackets would be a little bit smaller, but they're saying, well, we would add that in. And that's where the coaches are having some problems because they're saying, wait a minute. How can you add in women's wrestling? But you're saying there's no room and no time for double elimination. So I think we need to get people.
And by the way, there's been some rumors that some of those coaches that have been fighting for double elimination for years and years and years, they're not anti-women's wrestling.
Correct.
Just trying to get that concern addressed.
their priority is double elimination first before women's wrestling. That's their.
Not that it's a priority per se, but they're the men's coach, so they've got to fight for the kids to coach. Right.
Tons of questions. There's so many questions about that, and that would be a different podcast, I guess.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
so there's those types of things that say, well, wait a minute, we're using the Excel Center, and it is awesome, and it is fun, and when you're on the floor and everybody's wrapped around you up above, man, it's loud and it's awesome. So the lighting is cool. I love it. I love
since you're the guy now, Coach, I've got a couple simple things that don't take any more time, right? So
correct. So there are things at that state tournament, like, you know, if you weigh in and you're the first group to weigh in, and then, you know, a single A weighed in, then double A weighs in and triple A weighs in. We were underneath just starting triple A weigh-ins, and the 1A wrestlers were already running around warming up. Yeah. And they had that such a short window to do their state tournament. The mats were empty. Nothing was going on out there. People were like, why can't you let the kids warm up? They're jogging, trying to weave through kids weighing in. Why can't you have that? If you look at, have you ever been underneath at the state tournament where the wrestlers are?
I have not.
Okay. So when you're underneath, it's, you know, basically storage. It's the underbelly of the Excel Center. And you got a Zamboni driving by, you got kids laying everywhere. And yet you have these like little strips of mat and concrete pillars in the way. And there's like one little room. Why can't there be some more mats laid out? Why can't, you know, there's those types of things. And I'm sure people have asked these questions before, but if people keep asking it and keep asking it, that motivates me to just go, okay, well, I got to find out the answer. So I can give you the answer and why I couldn't tell Minnesota High School League, look, this has been asked for years. Why can't we? Like, what if we say no? Like, why do we have to take no as the answer? What can be done?
So I have a couple parent or spectator questions about the state tournament, right? And I think it's a great state tournament. So and the people that run it put a lot of work and effort into it. And there's so many great things about the state tournament, but there's a few things that could be different. And I've been to 5 or 6 different high school state tournaments in my life. And this was the first state tournament that I went to that didn't have a highlight. And I know we did it the previous year. It didn't have a highlight before the finals. And I think there's an opportunity when they're rolling up mats and taking it down to 3, and we're sitting there watching. And unfortunately, last year we were watching a tragedy, and thank God. I mean, I was crying. Everyone was crying. And his uncle or whatnot had a heart attack right behind me, and it was emotional. And I hope he's doing well, by the way. And it was a really interesting moment watching 17,000 or 12,000 parents all know that could be their kid, and not a movement, not a word. And it was, and from my understanding, he's a great kid, and I'm glad he's doing well. But why in that moment couldn't we have a highlight reel when they're taking it down to 3 mats, right? Instead of watching guys break mats down, right? We could be watching a highlight.
They did it the year before,
and it was popular.
And really, I'm just wondering if that person wasn't there.
Well, there's other people that are volunteering to do it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Then I have another pet peeve is, out of all the high school tournaments I've been to, every 2 weights they take a quick break, and then they have a podium, and the kids go up on the podium. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like Patrick Kennedy this year, being a 4-time state champ, there wasn't an opportunity for us to acknowledge that or to salute his efforts, right? And when you don't have that podium opportunity, it takes away opportunities for acknowledgement, but it also, it's awkward at the end to do all the awards and whatnot at the end. And I also, my other pet peeve is, as a parent, my son was in the finals, and as a parent, I had people getting up and walking in front of me as my son was wrestling. And I'd never experienced that at a state tournament before, because their son was done. Everyone's trying to get good seats. Right. I don't blame them, right?
Yeah.
But there's no break every 2 matches for folks to get up, run to the bathroom, grab a soda,
Yeah.
or whatnot. And so there's a lot of incidental disrespect going on.
Yeah.
Because people are getting up and moving while other matches are happening, and it doesn't provide a good flow.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've seen that a lot. I think at the NCAA tournament, they in between they do podium. I thought I heard that they keep it at the end because they don't want people leaving. So by the time your kid was up, schools who don't have any heavier weights might be gone. And
well, there's a whole other debate then. Why does it always have to end on heavyweight?
Right. Well, yeah.
Why can't it end on the year before? Why couldn't it end on Ryan Sokol and Charlie Pickle the year before? That's the match everyone wanted to see.
Why not? Why not? I don't know
A
why.
lot of people would have liked seeing your son's match be the final match this year, right? I mean, there's opportunities. It doesn't always have to be 106 and heavyweight, right? And if we're creating an event and you want people to stick around, and you've got 2 nationally ranked hammers in the finals, make that the final night, or the final of the night. People will stick around. It's not a hard. These are things that take no more time.
Correct.
It's just a little event planning.
Correct. Yeah. If you have that right, I mean, it's not hard before to be the showcase weight class,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I know maybe the showcase weight class would be in AA, Sokol and Piquel, but the triple A and the single A guy will have to just deal with it, because that's the year that they're going the same time. But it could be somebody totally, you know, different weights each time. And like I said, the NCAA is doing that, and we can hype things up.
And there's times I don't follow a lot of the single A stuff, but there's times I'd like to personally stand up and applaud somebody who's a 4-time state champion single A. And if I'm in the middle of watching a match, I don't get that opportunity. So those are some things that I would say are little things that would really help our state tournament. And they don't cost any more money. They don't take any more time. It's just, to your point, it's not what's always been done.
Right. And it probably also has to do with that Minnesota, instead of doing the random draw, we always start at 106 and we always end at heavyweight, because we're traditional. And so, right. I'm just curious as if you had Simley wrestling a dual meet against Shakopee, and whatever was going to be the 2 state champs against each other, let's just say it was, I don't know off the top of my head, so let's just say 126 was the best match of that night. Why couldn't that be the last match? Why
don't you? It's only common sense. If you want to pull a bigger draw to your dual meets, right? And people who are worried about what, and I'm not saying they do, but I would certainly hope the people that are arguing for better dual meets aren't the same people that are arguing to keep it 106 to heavyweight. Because if they're talking about planning an event or hype, then one doesn't support the other, right? So right. And we don't get a vote at the National Federation of High School Sports anyway, because we don't have a descent plan.
Yeah.
We don't do the hydration plan. So there's nothing stopping us from being able to pick whatever weight we want. We don't get a vote anyway.
Right.
So
there's a lot of different things you could do.
So those would be some of the things that I've heard a lot of, is people would like the awards every couple matches, right? They would like to end on the best match of the night, whether it's single A, double A, triple A, you know, and to your point, some of the warm-ups and some of the other coaches. So since you brought it up, I thought there was some opportunity there where I know those are the things I've heard from spectators and from longtime supporters that they would like to see at the state tournament, and a highlight reel instead of watching guys break net.
I'll tell you about that highlight reel. I'm not going to lie to you, as a coach, but also as a dad, having my son warming up for the finals, I was trying to stay as far away from him as possible. I didn't want him to see any nerves on me at all or anything. So they were breaking down the mats, and I said to Coach Drogmiller, I said, let's go watch the highlight video, because last year was so awesome. It was such a great highlight video. I said, let's go. I'm going to leave Kale alone for a while. Let's you and me, we're going to go watch. So, and then some of the other kids on the team were like, hey guys, let's go watch the highlight video. And I think they were doing the chicken dance instead. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And so then I realized No highlight video. So I think if somebody was willing to do it, I don't think the Minnesota High School League can have any problem adding that in.
No, but I know there's a cost to it, right? And if somebody's willing to come in and support
Sure.
that, I'm sure it would be
Sure.
It'd probably be appreciated by a lot of us, right?
Sure. And like, I'm wide open for suggestions. So like if anyone does, watch this and listen and want to say, hey, Swenson, I was thinking this, please let me know, because it's not just me and my thing. It's
right.
I'm trying to do what's best for the whole sport and for everybody in general.
So let's wrap up on a fun Wayzata note.
Yeah.
How many state qualifiers are you going to have next year? You're coming back with 7. What's your prediction?
No, I don't do predictions. I don't do predictions, and I don't do. No way. All my crazy dads right now are already trying to build the lineup. So already next year, so I don't do it. So I'll tell you what my son would say. My son would say we'll have 14. We're going to have 14 going to state. We're going to bring our whole team to state.
So are the dads going to let you know what the lineup is before the season starts, or do you have to figure it out?
They tell me every time they see me, here's what I'm thinking. This is what we're going to do. And I'm like, guys, we have no idea what's going to happen by time November starts. So, we thought we had the full lineup and our football team wins a state title and they don't get done until after Thanksgiving. Well, we were missing 4 guys for the first month and a half of season. So
I think last year we had for the first time in a long time, Simile made it to state, and we had 9 of our starter wrestlers were also starter football players. So it changed the entire makeup.
I don't want to do any predictions or anything. You never know injuries. You never know a lot of things. So I just we're going to do well. We're
all right.
Pretty tough.
All right. I know you're going to have a good season. I look for you guys to do very, very well next year, and you've done a brilliant job of building your program and building the support around it. And we appreciate you taking on the extra responsibilities and being so passionate about it. So I think we've probably drugged this interview out a little bit longer than we fully anticipated. So again, thanks for taking the time, and I hope your family's healthy and stay safe, and that goes to all the wrestling families out there. This isn't Rich Bender, the head of the USA Wrestling, is put it out there. This isn't a time for wrestlers to be tough and work through torn ACLs. This is a time for everyone to adhere to the restrictions, take a timeout, take a breather. Let's get past this so we can get back on the mat.
Yeah.
So thanks, Coach. And
I appreciate the coverage and the support. And you guys stay healthy as well.
All right, Coach. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.